Hello everyone, welcome to today's NASM Success Live webinar. My name is Ian Montel and I'm here with Brian Bajan. We're going to be taking you through a great webinar today discussing some very important content that's going to be important to you regardless of where you're at within your fitness career, talking assess and success, understanding the overhead squat assessment. So we are glad to have you on board. We've got a couple of housekeeping things to go through, but before we get there, we wanted to open up our first poll of the day for you. So I will give Brian the floor, ask the poll question, and then we're going to throw it up on the screen so you all can answer it.
All right, great to meet you guys. Thanks for coming and spending some time with us today to learn more about assessments. As you're filtering in, we just want to get an idea of where you guys are in your fitness career. So we have a couple options that you can choose from. Are you studying for the CPT exam right now? Maybe a new trainer soon to be minted. Are you actively working as a personal trainer? Are you maybe a veteran trainer working with some specialty clients? Or maybe you're not a trainer, but fitness is a big passion of yours. So we're going to throw a poll up on there, see what kind of audience we're working with, and excited to see.
With that said, as you guys are getting those polls completed, we've got some of those numbers coming in now. I see we're going to go through a little bit of the etiquette to start with. So to expand your webinar dashboard, make sure you are using the orange arrow on the right of your screen. Over there, you will find a questions field. Put in all of your questions there. Once we get to the end of the webinar, we will have a Q&A session, so we'll get to dive into some of those questions, especially some of the common ones that you all are asking in regards to this. We'll get back to the unresponded questions within about 48 hours, so we definitely want to make sure whatever questions you have, you put those in there so that we can get back to you on those in a timely fashion. There is a 888 number available, 1-888 number that we'll get over to you. And then again, as I mentioned before, we will have a Q&A at the end. We've got a moderator here who is going to be writing those questions down for us that we will get to. With that said, let's take a look at kind of what we're working with as far as the poll results go here. It looks like about 50% of you are currently studying for the CPT exam, which is excellent. Welcome aboard. Hope you're enjoying the course. If you need any support on that, we are here to help you out. But that is the first step in a life-changing career as you go forward. So that's awesome. It looks like 32% are actively working as a personal trainer. So this hopefully will provide you a little bit more information as far as the effectiveness of the overhead squat and what it can do for you throughout your career. 9% of you are working with specialty clients, which is a fantastic thing. That means you guys have already identified your niche clientele, who it is you're going to be working with, and getting that business set in place. So kudos to you. And then 9% on the low end are not a trainer, but fitness is your passion. So hopefully coming out of this webinar, you'll understand a little bit more about the overhead squat assessment and why it is important for you, not only for fitness professionals, but also those who are working with, who are passionate within the industry in what they're doing. So there's a lot of information to help cover a lot of those different demographics today. Next question, as we start getting going, and this is more just to find out what it is you guys are using today, so that we can address some of those common things that we might see differences with. But what movement assessment do you currently use now? Obviously, we're going to be talking the overhead squat assessment. It's the foundation for a lot of the philosophy we have, but there are several others out there. So choices here: overhead squat assessment, functional movement screen. Are there others that you're working with? And if you don't use movement assessments, that's okay. We're going to talk through why those movement assessments are important, but we would just like to know, is this brand new information for you? And how can you better utilize them if you know about them as you continue to move through what it is you're doing either in your career or really with fitness as a whole? So we'll give you a couple more seconds to wrap up this poll before we move forward, but we are excited to get going and talk through some of these things today. So about 2 more seconds and we'll close the poll. Looks like some numbers are still moving. Yeah, let's go ahead and close it there and see what we've got and what knowledge we have. So 53% of you are currently using the overhead squat. That's awesome. Obviously, what we like to be able to see here but you clearly see the benefit and value of the overhead squat assessment. So we're going to add some value to you today, give you some different ways that you can use it. The functional movement screen, about 25% of you are currently using that as well. Again, another movement assessment that's out there, and one that is common within the fitness industry. 16% of you are using other fitness assessments as well, which again is okay. We're going to walk through our philosophy and what the overhead squat assessment means to us here at NASM. And then 29% of you aren't currently using movement assessments. So we're going to talk about the importance of that for you today, and hopefully deliver the value that these overheads or the movement assessments have, specifically again the overhead squat assessment. So with that said, let's continue to roll through this. So we do have a giveaway today on the screen in front of you. It is the Hypersphere from that is very practical to use when you're using or going through the overhead squat and being able to identify what you can use with clients as far as the different modalities that will be able to help them through things. Do you have a Hypersphere at home?
I think I have just about one of every Hyper Ice product. Yeah, it's nice because sometimes with the foam roller, it's a little bit hard to get a little more pinpointed pressure in certain areas. So yeah, the Hypersphere is definitely a nice come up. And if you stay with us for the whole webinar, you have an opportunity to win one, and we'll send it right to you.
Absolutely. So definitely hang out. It's a raffle we're going to have at the end of the webinar. Another thing that we've got going, I'm not going to reveal it yet, but we have a really cool special towards the end of the webinar that we'll discuss a little bit more in depth, but that's only going to be for those who hang on all the way to the end. So definitely make sure you hang out with us and just hear all the great information we have in regards to the overhead squat assessment. Again, my name is Ian Montel. I'm the NASM product manager here at the headquarters in Chandler, Arizona. My main job is to make sure everything we put out from a product perspective is going to meet your needs, either as a fitness professional, a current personal trainer, or a future trainer within the industry. So that's what my role is. I've been in the industry for 18 years now, and I'm fortunate enough to be working at the National Academy of Sports Medicine at this point in time. Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah, very excited to be with you guys here today. I am a trainer. I've been working in the industry for about 12 years. Worked a ton of different types of jobs in the industry, done some commercial fitness, some corporate wellness, worked at Arizona State for a little while. So I've seen a wide variety of clients and fitness goals. Assessments has been a super important part of my career. And yeah, I'm excited to dive into the details and show how we saw 29% of people not using assessments currently. We have really effective ways that aren't overly time consuming either. Like you can fit these assessments in to any training protocol, and it's going to give you information that's going to help drive your program in the right direction. So.
Right. And let's go ahead and really begin to dive in with what is the overhead squat assessment. And this is something I'm really passionate about and really, really excited about as far as what it is we're able to do with the overhead squat assessment. Not only from being able to pinpoint some issues that your clients might have, drive program design with them, be able to effectively modify exercises as necessary to meet their individual needs. But when you're looking at building your business, the overhead squat assessment offers a whole new level of opportunity to present, close clients, close those sales, keep people around, get them to buy into everything it is you're doing, and really sell yourself as an expert. So there's a multitude of reasons why you want to start utilizing these particular assessments if you aren't already. If you are, there's definitely always work that can be done in order to utilize them more effectively, whatever your goal or outcome is. So as we begin to look at what the overhead squat assessment is and what we are looking for, it is a dynamic movement assessment where we're actually evaluating somebody's movement to be able to identify any compensations they might have. If they aren't moving in the right pattern, as far as the utilization and application of that, we'll be able to determine potential for injury, overuse, how we can help them move better and really work on the dysfunctions that they are beginning to show. It's not a diagnostic tool. We leave that up to licensed professionals. I know that can be a little bit of a gray area at times, but it helps us to be able to identify areas that we can certainly help people improve in their daily lives, help improve their movement patterns, and just be able to live a more functional life altogether. When we are performing an overhead squat assessment, we've got some videos and photos coming up to be able to demonstrate this to you. But as far as how to conduct one, we have several different pieces that go into place as far as our basic approach all the way up to a more advanced approach through our corrective exercise. Today we're going to be covering more of that basic approach, but once we get you worked up into these higher levels through corrective exercise performance enhancement, you're going to be able to advance really what it is you're doing and able to do as a fitness professional. Anything you want to add as far as the importance of kind of what we're looking to do with an overhead squat assessment?
Yeah. So when you're, a lot of people are studying for their CPT from what the poll is showing us there. What the overhead squat assessment allowed me to do, at least, is put yourself in a position of credibility right away with new clients. Mm-hmm. Because when you get into a gym, you're often going to be doing things like orientations or first sessions. And by conducting some assessments and gleaning that information, we know where to start from, and it makes them really comfortable. Absolutely. Because they feel like you're providing value right away.
Right.
Yeah. So the assessment is something that I do like with every orientation, because we need to know where we're starting from to make sure we're not going to end up maybe running into potential problems down the road. And starting at the appropriate level. So the overhead squat has really helped me do that, and I can replicate it super consistently too.
Right. Which is a key piece as we continue to work with the same clients, being able to take a look at where they're at today, where they're at tomorrow, and where they're headed to in the future. So easy replication is going to be important so that we can reassess, evaluate, and make sure whatever program we're designing for the clients is going to be meeting those needs and goals that they have. So
no cookie cutter.
Exactly. Definitely not a cookie cutter approach. So when we are performing the overhead squat, a little bit of technical issue going to the next slide, but there we go. So to your point, Brian, it does allow for individualization with that. And this little graphic here, again, we'll have some more slides so you can see it better, but this graphic here shows the lateral view of the overhead squat and how we're looking at somebody from the side and really being able to identify some of those compensations. The nice thing about this graphic is it's showing you the ideal position we want to see somebody in when they're performing the overhead squat. It's not what you're going to see all the time.
Rarely the case.
Certainly not when I perform the overhead squat are you going to see that, but definitely something that we want to be looking for with them. But again, it's going to allow individualization, and you're going to look at everybody as far as what compensations do they have, and everybody's going to demonstrate a little bit of a different compensation, different areas of the body, how deep those compensations go, and that's all going to be guided by what they're doing in their daily life, past injuries, potential surgeries that they've had, all kinds of different things that we can really begin to dive into and look at. And we can only perform an effective overhead squat assessment if we know what their full history looks like. But when we combine the full history with the overhead squat, we can start to see kind of what's going on and get a better understanding as far as what people are doing. And that's really where the individualization comes in that whole individualization approach. Now, we call it professional magic, which is pretty cool. Interesting side note, my dad's a professional magician, so this fits right in with kind of my background on that. But when we're talking professional magic, not from the illusion piece, but really from the personal training standpoint, a client's limitations are visualized for us. When we start to take a look at the overhead squat, we start to see a lot of their limitations demonstrated, and that leads to meaningful dialogue with the client. Why is dialogue around the overhead squat important for your clients?
Well, it's very interesting you bring that up. So I had a lot of my clients are active aging adults. So as you had mentioned, you know, you have a fun, exciting life. You might have some injuries in your past. And it makes me think specifically about this one. He was about 60 years old, and we were doing an overhead squat, and I noticed an issue with one knee really going inwards. And we had gone through the PAR-Q, so he had told me all about previous injuries and things. But sometimes if you've been around for a while, you might be forgetting some things.
Sure.
And that he's like, oh, well, now that you mention it, I did have this skiing incident. So it helps you with this fact-finding mission so that you can make the most complete program.
Right.
So yeah, the things that have happened in the past kind of present themselves at times in this overhead squat. So it allows us to get more complete information.
Right. And now you've had that open dialogue. Everything's beginning to come together, and you have set yourself up as an expert, being able to identify these things, right? And that's where you begin to look like a magician, which is that professional magic. But it ultimately positions you as a professional and sets you up to demonstrate how you can gain insight into their movement and exercise needs. And you can take it to the next step with your programming. Quick on-the-fly adjustments is needed to exercises when you start to see these things. And that kind of leads into this whole other point that I like to make when it comes to these types of assessments. We always start with the overhead squat assessment, and then we make adjustments based upon that. But it also gives us the opportunity, once we understand what it is we're looking for, every repetition with the client becomes an assessment opportunity.
Yeah.
So as we see these issues popping up, we know what to be looking for, what we can watch for, and how we can begin to evaluate somebody every time they're performing an exercise, leading us to that next phase of when we're looking at somebody and coaching and cueing them. It's not about just making sure that they are performing the exercise correctly, but it gives us that extra opportunity to say, I'm seeing some other issues going on here. What else can we be working on, or what other points do we need to be taking away? So it's really an individualized piece that you can start to take away and work with every single client in a different way, which is just amazing. And that goes right into how it is we're going to be able to design workouts based upon the person, not that cookie cutter technique or template. We'll be able to pick exercise specifically designed to improve motion. It will reduce and help us avoid exercises that may potentially make the motion worse. So not necessarily contraindicated exercises, but exercises we might want to avoid because we don't want to exacerbate an already existing problem. We want to fix it. And then it reduces guesswork and provides you a direction in your program design process, which is amazing. And it's really what we are about here at NASM, is how can we take this detailed scientific information and make it immediately applicable to you as a professional, or for those of you who are out there, the 9% of you who are just fitness enthusiasts. How can you take this information and immediately apply it to your own practice and what it is you're doing every day in the gym? So that's really what we're about, is taking this deep level of scientific information, bringing it up for you and making it an immediate application for you, yourself, clients, or whoever it may be. So talking about the fun stuff and where we are going to go with this, the translation of basic purpose in the overhead squat assessment. So when we begin to look at assessing somebody, we always start with the kinetic chain. So on the screen, you see what we normally look at as a static postural screen. Somebody just standing there, right? This is ideal posture. Static posture is where you are at in the moment right now. So you can take a look at me. You can take a look at Brian. What is our posture? Who has the more appropriate posture? My assumption is Brian, not myself, leaning into the camera here. But the static posture is where you are at right now, and we can take a look at anybody's static posture. The way we want to approach it is looking at the kinetic chain, floor to head, starting with the knees and ankles. Then we're going to take a look at the feet and ankles. Then we'll move up to the knees. We'll hit the hips and the lumbar spine, and then finish up at the shoulders, and then the cervical spine, or the head and neck, and really take a look at what's going on there. With the views, we like to get a 360 view. So we look at the front, the side, and the back. We do the same thing with the overhead squat, but for just the basic principles that we're going to lay out here today and really getting started and understanding the movements, we begin by just looking at the front and the side. And then when we want to go deeper, take that deeper look, we'll go ahead and look at them from the back. But for the purposes of today, what you need to know, let's say for a CPT, entry-level fitness professional, front and side are going to give you plenty of information to begin and start your journey with. And what we're looking at for ultimately is overactive versus underactive muscles, which is one of my favorite topics. A lot of times we begin to look at how can we make muscles work better or more efficiently through mechanical principles, get them stronger or mechanically lengthen them. When we're looking at the overhead squat, we're actually looking at it from a deeper perspective, and we're looking at how the brain controls the muscles. So when we're talking overactive muscles, oftentimes we're going to see muscles that are firing when they shouldn't be, or muscles that are working overtime becoming overactive. When we're looking at underactive muscles, these are muscles that just aren't working. They aren't firing at the appropriate times. They aren't activating at all in some cases. So when we're looking at this holistically, the overhead squat, what we're going to look to do is how can we get these muscles back into a refined state of coordination to work together in order to improve movement patterns, which to me is just amazing because we're looking at the neuromuscular system, not just the mechanical system of the muscles.
So this is all part of a bigger picture is what you're kind of getting at here.
Yes, it is. It is a global effort of muscular coordination and synchronization, getting everything to function the right way, which is some of the coolest stuff we can do with people, and really begins to look at that magic piece, so to speak, bring it back. But
a little synergy.
Yeah.
And just out of curiosity, because we do have so many people studying for the CPT right now, you had mentioned that we start from the ankles. What's the rationale for starting there versus somewhere else?
So that's just to make sure we're always looking at the body the same way and how we move up the kinetic chain. So some people might look at it a different way. That's just to make sure we have a standard protocol and a standard process. And we generally start from the front, and from the front view, you're going to be looking at the feet and ankles. We'll get into this in a moment, but you'll look at the feet and the ankles and the knees, and then we'll go to the side. And you're still going to look at the feet and ankles, but now we're going to start looking at the hips, low back, and then the shoulders. And then from the back, you'll be able to see some other things as well. So that it's really, we want to look at the feet up, look at the stable base, the foundation, right? If you have a unstable foundation, it's going to affect everything else. So if we can identify that as a major issue or a major compensation that's going on, we're going to see that carried up through the rest of the body. So that's part of the reason why we work through it ground to head or feet up.
That makes sense.
But
Okay.
good question. So when we start to look at things and how to identify some of the major movement compensations that we are looking at, again, it's going to be looking at the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints, starting with the feet, moving up to the knees, the hips, the shoulders, and the head. And when we're looking at it from a static standpoint, the lines you see on the screen are going to be the important ones we're looking at for that alignment. Are the shoulders straight across? Do we see level hips? What about the knees? Are they straight ahead? Toes, are we able to stand with those straight ahead? Do the ears line up with the shoulder all the way down? Do we have that nice alignment? This will come in play and become an important part as we continue to move through. But recall, this is just for the static assessment. Moving more into what it is we're going to be looking at when we get into the overhead squat. So with the overhead squat, when we have somebody performing this, always perform it with shoes off. This is a common mistake people do. Shoes need to come off because we want to be able to see everything that's going on. The other thing is the support in the shoes, the height of the heel in the shoe. That's all going to throw everything off, make things a little bit easier for some people, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But shoes always come off when performing this. Hands go up over the head. We want them to be arms nice and straight up and down. And then we're going to have them perform the overhead squat. Keep maintaining their arms overhead. go down to about the height of a chair, or if you have difficulty, a client has difficulty getting down to that without pain, have them go down to pain-free range of motion. We're going to be able to see a lot if they have that restriction there, but we want them to squat down to about the height of a chair. My rule of thumb is have them do it about 5 times from each angle, because we'll begin to see things break down a little bit after about 5 repetitions or so. But we don't have to have them do it for an extensive period of time. And then we'll talk about tempo as well when we start to look at the video we've got coming up. But from the anterior or front view, what we want to see is the photo on the left. Are they keeping their knees in line with the toes? Are the feet staying straight ahead? Those are going to be the 2 major checkpoints. Now, common compensations we have here are the feet moving out, the toes moving out, and, and the ankles begin to collapse in. So we have concentric overactivity generally on the posterior aspect of the leg, and then the underactivity tends to be on the anterior and then lateral parts of the leg. We start to look at this, and that's why we start to see things beginning to move the way they are with that. So we just want to make sure that when we're looking at this, being able to identify those pieces in those places so that we can pinpoint where it is we're going to go on the plan of action we're going to take. Now, what we can see as far as the impact on motion, at your desk right now, you may want to stand up and try this motion out. You're going to find that it puts a lot of stress on your ankles performing this particular movement pattern, moving your feet out, starting to collapse things in. You're going to feel a lot of stress on the ankles. This is one of the big causes of this is actually heels and wearing high heels. As much as people like to wear them, it starts to shorten up, so to speak, or cause overactivity in the calf musculature, and that starts to cause a lot of issues that we begin to see going on. And this can happen even with men. Heel height this big, wearing dress shoes all the time for men can start to significantly impact what it is we're seeing here. And then that's going to lead to issues as we start to look at how things are beginning to play together. Speaking kinetic chain, this is going to be work up the chain. We're going to see issues at the knees and going up to the hips onto the shoulders. So we want to make sure this is identified early. The thing is, if we start to look at people on a daily basis, a lot of people are walking around with this. They don't even have to do an overhead squat before we start to see the feet turning out, the ankles collapsing every single day, every step somebody takes. But this becomes essentially our baseline, and where we start to look as we move up. We look at the feet and ankles, then we begin to again look at the knees. And as you mentioned, your client had the knees coming in, right? Mm-hmm. So as you can see here, we have her on the right side performing this movement pattern of the knees caving in, but to highlight what it is we've got going on at the kinetic chain, you can also see her ankles collapsing and her feet turning outwards. So as we begin to see that happening, the knees start to cave in. Now we're starting to see a breakdown of the entire system, and we're going to start to see some major issues. Now, why this becomes a big problem is, again, perform this motion sometime and perform this movement and feel the stress it puts on your knees. Every day, coming down, pounding down on with this movement pattern is going to put a lot of stress on the ligamentous structure within the knee cavity, and could lead to potential injury breakdown. One of the demographics that we see a lot of issues with this is actually teenage female athletes. As they start to mature, their bodies start to change. We begin to see a lot of issues going on, and they naturally want to have those knees come in, and they are one of the groups that is at most risk for catastrophic knee injury at a very young age, from plyometrics, box jumps, those high impact activities, volleyball players, basketball players in that female age group, right, are going to be at high risk for this. So these are things that we want to begin to identify and then begin to address through proper training protocols, and being able to identify how it is we can improve these particular issues. So we're going to see an impact from the glutes, which it tends to be a very underactive muscle, which is amazing, the biggest muscle in the body, and it tends to be very underactive, very underutilized for a lot of different reasons. Then we begin to look at the adductor complex, and it's pulling everything in at the femur.
They're super excited.
Yeah, right there, they're super excited. They're early to the party, as we like to say. So we got that concentric overactivity that begins to pull everything in, and it all begins to fall apart.
And this is an example of the wrong type of synergy.
Yes.
Where you can see that the ankles are having that compensation, and then oftentimes you go right up to the knee and you see the compensation where the knees are caving in. So yeah, being able to, so would you say that it's a good idea if you are working with, let's say, female athletes, 12 to 30, like this assessment is almost a must do, right?
Oh, this assessment, this is where we should start everything. But absolutely, with this age group, that particular demographic, this becomes very important to look at. And what we ultimately want to do is be able to look at this, see what's going on, and then obviously address the concerns. But what if we see something as bad as we're seeing on the screen right here, which oftentimes it won't be this bad, it's going to be more subtle. But if it's this bad, then we immediately know high impact activities are probably out. Probably don't want to do a lot of box jumps, a lot of plyometrics. We want to get the landing mechanics right until before we continue down that pathway, or we're leading to stress injuries, overuse injuries, and then worst of all, those non-contact season-ending injuries that nobody ever wants to have, early surgery, early osteoarthritis, a whole host of issues as we continue to move forward and progress in life. So it becomes an important point that we take a look at this and really begin to identify and address these issues now as opposed to later. So absolutely, it was very important for this demographic.
And that's also positioning you as the respected authority, which makes all your recommendations going forward a lot easier for the client to accept and utilize.
Absolutely, absolutely. And all of this information, again, going back to the opening dialogue of what you can have with the client, if you have let's say a couple parents come in and say, I need you to work with my female daughter. She's a volleyball player. We want her to be able to jump higher because she's playing a lot at the net. So she's got to do blocking or spiking, whatever the case may be. And you begin to look at this and see her performing this overhead squat. This opens up a whole level of conversation that you can have on what it is you're looking at, what it is you're seeing, the potential risks and issues. And now you have the buy-in from the parents, you have the buy-in from the athlete at that point, and when you provide corrective homework for that client, they're going to be more likely to do it on the back end. So it becomes very important to take a look at this and be able to have that dialogue, in that intelligent dialogue, setting yourself as the expert, getting the buy-in, and continuing to work with the client in an effective, individualized way.
Sounds like some long-term relationships.
That's right. That's ultimately what we're looking to do. Build those long-term relationships, and the overhead squat becomes a key component of that as we continue to work through with your clients. Now, when we begin to look at the lateral view, the side view, we're looking more at the lumbopelvic hip complex, or the LPHC for short, as you see there. And a couple of things that we're going to look at with this. The first one we're going to take a look at is that low back arch. For me, in my current role, I spend a lot of time sitting at a desk, which isn't the best thing for a fitness professional, fitness enthusiast to be doing. But for those of us who sit at desks, a lot of the time we begin to get a lot of low back pain, and that comes from overactive hip extensors leading to other issues, and then we start to get that low back arch, putting a lot of stress on the lower back. One of the commonly known statistics is that 80% of people are going to present with low back pain at some point in their life, right?
Going down.
We want to be able to help and assist with that. Now, we can't cure it. We aren't those kinds of professionals, but we can take a look and see, wow, you're putting a lot of stress on your lumbar spine. I mean, just sit at the desk here and go ahead and put yourself into that compensation. Feel it on your low back. Yeah.
Got it now.
Yeah, you begin to feel just how much stress, and not just necessarily on the musculature, but it's almost like you can feel it in your spine, and you can start to feel those bones coming together. So this can lead to a whole host of issues, bulging discs and things like that. So again, taking a look at what's going on from the side and being able to identify, here's some major issues that we have going on that we need to address going forward. Now, one thing we're going to talk about, which is rather interesting, we see impact from the lats, the erectors, the hip flexors, and the hip extensors, as far as being identified as either overactive or underactive. But I want you guys to keep in mind the lats is with this one, and the role that they play. And this is one of those pieces that becomes very important as we continue to understand the kinetic chain, but also the deeper anatomy and what's going on. I know, especially for those of you who are studying for the CPT, why does the anatomy matter so much? I already know where the lats are and the biceps are, and I know how to work those effectively in the gym. Understanding where those are at anatomically and their attachments leads you to understand that an overactive latissimus dorsi muscle, based upon where it attaches down in the low back, you can start to understand that having that as overactive and then moving it up overhead is going to bring all of that together, causing this issue here, along with a whole host, a whole host of other issues that we begin to see. So understanding the anatomy for us becomes very, very important as we continue to move forward and work through these types of things. So definitely don't glaze over that part of your study materials. And if you are a fitness enthusiast, you definitely want to make sure you understand that as you begin to work in the gym or continue to work in the gym. And for those of you veterans who are on as well, it's never a bad idea to continually review your anatomy and make sure you're honed in on how all of this plays together. But again, we begin to see going on at the hip flexors, hip extensors, those become issues. Remember, the glutes are one of your main hip extensors that we have. So if that's not firing appropriately, we're going to start to see a lot of these compensations start to happen. And as we continue to work up, I can't stress enough, when it comes to this particular assessment and the movement assessments as a whole, we're looking at the kinetic chain. So if we begin to see an issue going on at the ankle, and maybe it's just the gastroc that it starts with, well, the gastrocnemius crosses the knee. And so if we have an issue at the ankle caused by the gastrocnemius that crosses the knee, we're going to start to see compensations and issues at the knee. Now, at the knee, we know part of these issues are also caused by an underactive gluteus maximus, or the glutes. That's going to lead to issues going up to the hips. And now, as we see here, we have a muscle that is being affected by issues or causing issues at the hips that attaches directly to the shoulder and the latissimus dorsi. And now, what started out as a minor issue at the ankle, we've affected the entire body and the entire kinetic chain. So what we're doing when we're looking at this is we have to remember that all of these are symptoms to one singular problem that's going on. It may be several problems, but when we start to break things down and we start to work through it effectively from a corrective standpoint, we can start to identify and locate where are the actual issues, where are the major components, major pieces that we want to get to. So going back to your story of why are the knees caving in? Oh, good, it's from a knee injury I had several years ago. That all comes from just understanding the anatomy, what we're looking at here, and how that all plays in together in order to be able to identify some of those issues that we see.
Yeah.
So that's looking at the low back arch. It becomes very easy to identify, as you can see, where we begin to have that low back arch going on, and some of the reasons why we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure we're identifying that as a potential issue with everything that we're seeing with the overhead squat. And then this goes right into the next piece of what we're looking at here, which is forward lean. Again, this is a pretty excessive forward lean here. You aren't going to see this a whole lot of the time.
That's hard work.
A whole lot of the time. And you'll see an example of this on the upcoming video and how subtle it can be. But essentially what we're looking for with this, and what I like to do, and I've done with clients in the past, is grab a couple dowel rods, and we want to see straight lines from the fingertips all the way down through the hips. But we want that to be parallel to the shin angle. Okay, so a lot of times we're looking at, or we're told and discussed, don't let the knees go over the shins. or go over the toes. Here we just want to know, are those angles the same? If they're the same, we've got some pretty good movement patterns going on with that. So as you can see on this picture on the left, in order to get that right angle that we're looking at, we see the knees beginning to encroach upon the toes and maybe even going a little bit past it. That's okay. That's proper movement mechanics. When we look at the same person, the same individual, keeping those knees back, throwing those parallel lines out of whack, then we have that excessive forward lean. Now, when we look at that excessive forward lean and we've got underactive glutes, when she comes up from that squat, in order to stand erect, we're going to have to activate the erector spinae. Now we're putting extra stress there, extra issues going on there, and we start to see a bigger breakdown of everything that's going on. We're essentially asking her to do a deadlift to get her torso back up, where what we could have her do instead is get into that nice angle, activate those glutes, push everything forward, and now we're functioning appropriately and have everything working in the right way. So when we look at it and really begin to understand what it is we're doing with this, we begin to see a lot of breakdowns, a lot of issues, but we can start to see how we can coach somebody into what it is we want them to do, get them to where they need to be. Again, when we're talking through this, we're talking about how can we get these muscles to coordinate and fire the right way, not necessarily how can we get the biggest glutes. It's not a butt blaster workout. That's not what we're going for. It's how can we get the glutes to fire? Because most people, if you ask them, for those of you who are actively working in the industry, I challenge you, ask your clients, can you fire just your gluteus maximus muscles? Can you get just your butt to fire, nothing else? Can you tense it up? Then go one step further. See, can you isolate the gluteus maximus and only fire one at a time? Most people probably can't. It's a common underactive muscle that we just aren't working because we're sitting in this position all the time.
Yeah, with those assessments, the one thing I haven't come across yet is people having overactive glutes and underactive adductors. It's just the way that we operate, the jobs that most people have. Just that's a non-issue almost.
Right. So that's going to become a key piece as you continue to work through, and one of those ones that you want to be looking for, you want to be looking at, because you know you're going to be able to identify that with most people. The next part of it is, are the arms falling forward? So this kind of falls in line similarly to that forward lean, but the arms falling forward is an interesting one in the fact that the arms, so here the arms are coming forward, as you can see on this one. Not only do we have that excessive forward lean, but the arms are no longer in line with the rest of the body. So this is a slight arms falling forward piece that we're looking at here. But the common mistake people make is, well, her arms must not be falling forward because it's in line with the ears. The ears aren't the piece that we're looking at, but we want to see, do the fingertips align with the rest of the torso? And we're not seeing that here, so those arms are falling forward. So when we're looking at this, are the ears a good landmark to be able to reference? Yeah, but it's not the landmark. We want to make sure that they're all in line. So again, going back to those tight lats, they begin to actually pull the arms forward. And so why does this become important? Going back to what we had discussed previously, is part of this is being able to identify how we might modify specific exercises.
That's
right?
What I'm wondering. Like, does it mean the exercise is just off the table, or
not always? So what we know here is we begin to have issues with this at the lats, and so that's a shoulder muscle working at the shoulder. So it must be things like overhead presses are off the table. It becomes a contraindicated exercise. No, that's not the case. That's not what we're talking about. We can still perform the overhead press. It's a great way to get what we're looking for. We just might not go all the way up. We might go to the point where, we're beginning to see some compensation.
As soon as you start to see that belly poking out.
Yeah, the belly poking out, we see that low back arch. That's the range of motion we want to stop at. So the full range of motion may only be to here before we see compensation, but that's all we want to do. That's all we want to go for with that, because if we continue to go forward, we're only reaffirming an already bad movement pattern, keeping everything or continuing to just reinforce that, so to speak. So those are the kinds of things when we're talking about modifying exercises and choosing the right exercises from these assessments. It's not always about contraindications and what exercises we don't use. It's how do we use these exercises within the confines of what it is we're looking to do, combined with what it is we're seeing from these assessments. So just keep that in mind. Even with if we have the knees caving in movement pattern, it doesn't mean we can't do squats. It just means maybe we don't do a full squat. Maybe we only go part way down until we start to see those knees caving in, and we start to see some of those movement compensations.
And assign homework.
That's right. That's right. Remember, you're only with your clients maybe 1 to 3 hours a week, so they need to be working on these things aside from just being with you in the gym, because we are constantly battling what they're doing the rest of the week. So just one thing to keep in mind, that becomes very important. Now, we're going to spend the next couple of minutes actually showing you and demonstrating what it is you're going to be looking at from a video with the overhead squat. So we'll go ahead and pull that up here and talk through it. All right. So as we begin to look at the video, I am not, there it is. Okay, there it is. So this is actually Andrew, our one of the guys we got here, actually behind the camera performing this overhead squat. And as we look at it, it looks pretty good from the front, but let's, as you look at it from the front, those feet were turning in and out slightly, the knees were caved, or the ankles were collapsing a little bit. Here from the side, again, this is a little bit, just a tiny bit of forward lean that we begin to see here. If we were to take those dowel rods and really evaluate it, we'd start to see some of that forward lean. Other than that, it looks pretty good. So this goes to the point when you're starting out evaluating these pieces, we have to be willing to take the extra time, put in the extra repetitions, just like your clients would, really take a look at it and evaluate and practice looking at these pieces, because again, as you can see here, if you aren't looking, you're not going to see that that forward lean. You may have missed the feet turning in and out slightly, the ankles collapsing, especially because when he came back up, everything went back normal.
Yeah.
Right? So we have to be able to look at and identify those pieces. Now, looking at it from the rear, he looks pretty good from this perspective, but what we begin to see is a little bit of movement to the left, or what we call an asymmetrical weight shift. And this is one of those pieces, as you begin to go deeper with your education, you can begin to look at, okay, we've got an asymmetrical weight shift going on. What does that mean? What are next steps? What are next protocols as far as addressing, assessing, and programming for them? So this is definitely something you want to be working through and taking your time and making sure you're practicing, because you can see some of these are very minute shifts that we're beginning to look at and see and needing to identify.
Yeah, super nuanced.
Yep, yes. All right, so we'll pull that down. So what does this all mean to you at this point in time? There we go. And what it means to you is, what are you going to do with this? What are the next steps, next pieces? So one thing, or one place you can start with, and this is included within the webinar, these couple of downloads. It's also on our website and in several of our courses. The one on the left is the dynamic postural assessment checklist. So it's everything we just went through, and you're just simply going to mark down, yep, they've got their left knee is caving in, their right foot is turning out, so we can start to identify, program, and plan. But then the next piece that becomes very important for us is that postural assessment solutions table. So
what do we do with that information?
Exactly. So it's going to highlight what are the possible overactive muscles, what are the possible underactive muscles, and then what are some suggested exercises that we can program for to address some of those compensations that you've got going on. So these in combination are going to be key to what it is you are doing as a professional. Download these, take a look at them, start to identify and work with them. They become very important. But again, we have these not only within the webinar, we've got them in a lot of our courses as well as on our website for you to freely download as well. Now, going on, what path should you choose? What are CPTs going to do with this, or why would we want to go CPT route on overhead squat assessment?
So if you are a new trainer or an aspiring trainer, I think the CPT is the best place to start. Like we said, it's going to go over that anterior and lateral view of the assessments. And you can still learn a lot of corrective protocols from the CPT. And if you haven't gone through some of this before, you want to start with that. Because like we said, how important the anatomy portion is. You're going to understand all the landmarks that are causing these dysfunctions. And the best way to do that is going through the CPT. And one thing that, as a newer trainer myself, I spent a lot of time conducting these assessments and then realizing that some of this stuff is very nuanced, like the lower back arch, things of that nature. So something where we have a guided study program where you do have coaches that you can talk it out with might be a great tool so that you can really understand what's truly going on. It might be just a matter of a couple inches or deviation of a small amount, right? And you gotta know how to see that.
Oh, absolutely. So CPT would be a great place to start. Now, when we get into the CES, if you've got that baseline and you're looking for the next level, the CES is the place where we want to go. So on the video we just looked at, where we had the posterior view, the view from the back, that's going to be the next step in where we take it. Not only are we going to guide you down a deeper level when it comes to the anterior or the front and the side views, but we're going to add in that posterior view. So what do we do when we see that asymmetrical weight shift? Well, we don't just stop with the overhead squat. The next step is let's look at the single leg squat. Let's look at some of these more advanced assessments and really begin to identify things not from a bilateral point of view, but in a unilateral point of view. So maybe we've got some issues going on in the left leg that aren't going on in the right leg, or vice versa. And so we can start to pinpoint things even more, get more minute detail. And then this all builds into working with athletes, right? We can't leave the athletes out. We're all about the performance, right? So, earlier we talked about the female athletes and what they've got going on. When you're working with those high-level athletes, they aren't always going to demonstrate with movement compensation. So what is the next piece? It's actually the LESS test, the landing error scoring system test, that is showing to be more effective in identifying movement pattern dysfunction with athletes than the overhead squat assessment. So we can still take them through the overhead squat. We can still take them through the single leg squat. We can still take them through all of these corrective assessments. But then what are we going to do with the LESS test? What does that mean to them? And that's all about how are you landing? How are you landing effectively? And being able to look at it from a performance functional movement piece at what they're looking to do with their performance. So definitely depending on where it is we're going, that's where we're going to be. So just wrapping that piece around it, next poll question for you guys. What population do you work with, or would you like to work with? General exercisers, clients needing corrective exercise, performance athletes, or other? Just out of curiosity, which way would you go, or what do you want to do? And that will help guide you kind of down the pathway you want to go. With that said, I will lay out the foundation that everybody needs corrective exercise. We all have to have it, right?
Every single person.
So that's going to be a definitive pathway, but depending on the niche clientele you want to work with, that's going to really guide you down the next piece. So we're beginning to run a little bit short on time, so we'll go ahead and close that poll up. it looks like about 43% are wanting to work with just general exercisers, which is a fantastic piece and a fantastic place to start with your CPT. 31% clients needing more corrective exercise. That's actually something in a trend we're seeing is how are we going to apply corrective exercise to a lot more populations. So that's not surprising. I bet we see that number continue to grow. 23% looking to work with performance athletes. Corrective exercise is going to be important to them, but you're definitely going to want to look at how do these assessments apply to athletes through something like our PES program. And then other 4% work of you in other categories. So not sure based upon the poll where that puts you at, but again, we cannot downplay the importance of the overhead squat, dynamic movement assessments, how those all piece together in order to effectively program on an individualized basis. So with that said, we will go ahead and move on to a little bit of the Q&A from our moderator. We've got some questions that are going to come over. Before that, we do have the HyperIce winner. So we'll give that name out here in just a couple seconds. We will be reaching out to the winner to get their the address information where we can send this to. But I would like to announce Daryl Wilson, you have been chosen as a winner of the Hypersphere. So definitely want to be able to send that your way. We'll get you hit you up by email so that we can send this out and you can start using it immediately. Again, this is a fantastic piece of equipment that is going to provide a lot of benefit for you. With that, let's go ahead and go through some of the questions. How do you know what to focus on if your client has multiple compensations? This is an excellent question that a lot of people have, is how do you know what to focus on if they've got multiple compensations?
How do we prioritize?
It's going to there's not going to be one specific way as far as how do you necessarily prioritize, but we're going to look at maybe what is the most severe compensation we see going on, but it's going to be more of an approach where we're attacking them all at once, and we're going to have to program effectively for that. Maybe it's we look at all the compensation somebody has going on and the muscles that are all impacted by those particular compensations. So, for example, we see compensations going on at the shoulders, we see them going on at the hips. There's a lot of crossover in the musculature there. So, what are the similar muscles we have going on? And that's really how we take a look at the whole assessment or the holistic piece of everything that we've got going on, and then be able to prioritize that way. But at that point, it's not necessarily about the compensations, it's more about the musculature and what muscles do we need to address that are going to be most important to the overall effectiveness of what we're looking to do. So excellent question there. So I'll pose this one to you, Brian. Okay. How do you choose which trainer path to start with?
So that is an excellent question and something that our product team has thought a lot about to ensure that you have the appropriate level of resources and support to really ensure your success. So in short, we have our self-study programs, which are terrific if you are maybe already certified, kinesiology degree, you understand that anatomy well going into it. But if you are super passionate about exercise, maybe new to training, I'm a huge fan of what's called our guided study program, because you get the support of coaches you can reach out to. There's excellent discussion questions that are moderated by just amazing fitness professionals that are going to provide insight. And then if you want to take it to the next level, we can actually help find a place for you to work or like hands-on training at a fitness facility near you. Yep. Yeah. And that's a great place to get reps, put a client through a workout, and then really learn how to present fitness too. So it's we have a whole host of opportunity to get you ready for the career and make sure you can get busy quickly too.
Right, which is fantastic. So it's really going to come down to with that as far as what path do you start with? What is it you're looking to do? Where do you want to go, and what's going to be most effective to get you there, right? And we have a team of people here who can help you answer those questions and help you determine what path pathway is going to be best for you to achieve your career goals. Another one, how often do you recommend you perform assessments or reassess? And this is a great question. What we want to be able to do is look at reassessing maybe once every 4 weeks, once a month, but it doesn't have to be every assessment. So it's going to be dependent upon what specific goals your client is looking to do. Right now we are getting to the end of the hour, but we would like you to stay on for a Q&A as we continue to go forward if you have the time. But I just want to be cognizant as I continue to answer this question. With the assessments, it's going to be important for us to be able to look at what are the important points in order to achieve goals that we need to be reassessing on. So maybe we start out with somebody performing some cardiovascular assessments just to get their baseline, but they aren't looking to really improve a lot of cardiovascular training. So maybe we don't do that reassessment as often. We need to keep it in mind and reassess in order to address anything that might be coming up, but maybe that one's only done once every 2 months. When it comes to these movement assessments, because of the importance of them, I highly recommend that you're performing them once a month to make sure we are addressing those concerns. We aren't seeing any other major movement compensations pop up, and we're able to program effectively. The big thing is, as I mentioned before, remember our clients aren't with us the entirety of the week, every week, right? And we only get them for 1 to 3 hours, so we need to make sure that they are performing their corrective exercises and they're addressing these things. As much as we want to be able to address their issues sitting at a desk all day, if my job requires me to sit at a desk 8 hours a day, then I'm constantly having to combat that. So definitely when it comes to the movement assessments, at least once a month. But again, another component that we can always remember is every movement, every repetition gives us an opportunity to assess from a dynamic movement pattern. So great question. Here's another one, as we have some people who are interested in looking at potentially purchasing a package. Do you have to pay for the CES or PES 100% up front?
That is an excellent question. Fortunately, if you do go on the website or talk to one of our wonderful program advisors, we have the ability to spread the cost of the course out with no interest or finance fees. So it's the same as if you were to pay in full. And you can get a lot of your studies done before you pay for the whole thing. And even if you want to take the test and pass, and you can utilize that certificate while you're still making payments. So
that's good to know.
If you're maybe looking at this as a career change, that's a great opportunity to give yourself the best tools in the industry, be able to go out there into the workforce. And then a lot of students that I talk to end up paying off the remaining balance of their courses with their trainer income at that point.
Oh, right on, right on.
It's a nice feature.
Yeah, that's a good deal right there. All right, another content question. What would be the next steps for a client that performs the overhead squat with no movement compensations? Well, for me, there's always going to be a movement compensation we can identify. So a couple different ways that we can approach that is if they perform the overhead squat and we don't see any compensations, take them to the next level. Have them perform a single leg squat so that we start to look at things unilaterally instead of bilaterally. So that would be one option. Another option, I mentioned earlier that we talk about tempo. I breezed past that because of time, but you can adjust somebody's tempo as they're performing the overhead squat. So one of the things that we would have noticed on the video of Andrew was he showed a little bit of instability in the knees. They weren't caving in, but there was a little bit of a wobble. So let's have him perform the overhead squat a little bit faster. And we're going to start seeing some of those compensations and being able to identify those.
Draw out some of that inconsistency.
That's right. Maybe we have them perform it slower. So we can start to play with some of those things so we can really start to take a look at it. But those would be the next steps, is either advance them to a more advanced assessment so we can start to look at things, or change the tempo just to double check and verify, so to speak, from that perspective. Excellent question. In the overhead squat, if you find excessive forward lean, does that mean the muscle is weak or that the client can't activate the muscle? So again, it's going to be a combination of those. So with the excessive forward lean, the most common places I'm going to start looking at is we more than likely have overactive hip flexors that we need to be aware of. So those are going to be firing or working overtime, overactive. They aren't relaxing when they need to. And then we're probably going to see underactive glutes. So with this, that it doesn't necessarily mean that the glutes are weak as much as it means they aren't activating. So the next steps for that would be let's go ahead and work on essentially getting the hip flexors to shut off. And let's see if we can get those the glutes and some of the hip extensors to be able to activate through things like a floor bridge or maybe some donkey kicks. And let's really focus on getting those glutes to be firing at the appropriate times. So excellent question there. If a client has osteoarthritis in both knees, is there an alternative to the overhead squat assessment?
I like that question.
That's a really good one, but this goes back down to what we had discussed with the initial insights as far as how it is we perform this. If they've got osteoarthritis, then we would want to take them to pain-free range of motion. So how far down can they go without having pain? And the moment that they start to have pain, that becomes the range of motion for performing the overhead squat. It's not going to be ideal. We're probably not going to see all the movement compensations going on at that point in time, but we're going to be able to get enough. So really it comes down to shorten up that range of motion for that particular client. Again, we want to be very cognizant of that, not only with the overhead squat, but any movement that's going to really affect the knees and the movement going on at the knees and their range of motion there. Same applies to the overhead squat assessment. That's a really good question. We'll take a couple more here as we continue to work about 5 minutes past the hour. What exercises or movement patterns would we suggest for a client with rounded shoulders, underactive lats, and arms falling forward? What exercise or movement patterns would we suggest for that? So I think we actually discussed this yesterday. So what was the recommendation given you on that? With a little bit of scapular winging things going on like that, right?
Yeah. Well, I tried them last night, and they seem to go very well. The push-up plus. Mm-hmm. And so what we do there, we get in the standard push-up position, but then we continue on and move through that range of motion. So from like here to here. Yep. To my understanding, is that correct?
Yeah. So that's going to help a little bit. So that's the push-up with a plus to get some of those underactive muscles firing. Another thing with this, especially when it comes to the rounded shoulders, is performing rows, but not stopping at the end range of motion. Performing some scapular retraction on that is going to become very important. It doesn't have to be heavy rows to get those shoulders to be pulled back into place. The other piece with this is with rounded shoulders, we typically see overactive pec muscles. So we need to get those to shut off. We need to get those to not fire so much at the wrong time. So really getting in there, performing some flexibility exercises for the shoulders, some SMR in there, getting a hypersphere, for example, yes. But a tool specific for self-myofascial release to really get in there and begin to release the pec muscle. So excellent question there. With that, we might have one more. Nope, that. Okay. Oh, yes, the final piece of this as we have on the screen here, and then we will wrap it up. For those of you who have hung around, and maybe those who have left early, because we are a little bit over time on this, but 35% off CPT, CES, and PES programs only for today by phone. Call in, ask for this guy over here, Brian. He's going to be able to help you out. Just kidding. He will be there to help you out. But any of our program advisors are here to help you out on that and be able to provide you with a 35% off CPT, CES, and PES programs. So call in and ask about that today.
And don't forget to mention webinar 4 as the promo code there. And yeah, we're excited to talk fitness with you guys.
All right. We thank you guys for being online with us today. We look forward to seeing you in the future as we continue with these. Yeah, we will definitely look forward to seeing you all out there in the industry.